We are about to run the winner-take-all final championship heat of the 2010 Lamb Weston Columbia Cup. There's a pretty big story behind the story. The winner of this heat will probably leave here with the National High Point Championship. Steve David was ahead of Dave Villwock by 198 points when he got here, but Villwock now leads David by 56 points. Whichever one of them wins this final, Mark, presuming one of them does, will leave here with the season high points lead, and that is very important to these guys.
With just a few races this season here in North America, only 10 boats going in November to Doha, Qatar. Next week and this week, those races will determine the top 10 boats and probably who is going to be maybe the one or two for the national championship when they get to Qatar in November.
And they have lanes 1 and 2. That doesn't mean they are predestined to win this thing. You still have to get your boat up to the line on time, make a good start, and a good run into the first turn. Let's take a look at the field now for our winner-take-all championship final of the 2010 Lamb Weston Columbia Cup.
Lanes were chosen by total points earned all weekend long, and Dave Villwock had the first choice. He has had a perfect weekend, 3 wins, as well as being the fastest qualifier. He chose lane number 1. Steve David right behind him in the weekend point totals. The U1 Oboy Oberto are defending Columbia Cup champion 2 times around, looking for a three-peat from lane number 2. In lane number 3, it'll be the Graham Trucking and J. Michael Kelly, the U7. The U21, Miss Albert Lee Appliance, Brian Perkins behind the wheel, will be in lane number 4. In lane number 5, it'll be the Miss Red Dot with Nate Brown. In lane number 5 will be the Miss Peters and May with John Zimmerman. And in lane number 6, it will be Jeff Bernard and the U5 FormulaBoats.com. We'll be back with the start of the championship heat of the 2010 Lamb Weston Columbia Cup after this break.
There is tension on the race course, on the Columbia River, on the shoreline, certainly in the pit area, and here on the TV tower as well, as we are lining up the contestants now to race for the championship, the final heat of the 2010 Lamb Weston Columbia Cup. When we talk about the boats, Mark, coming down to the start, watch with us and we'll try to let you know who has the advantage right at start finish. Remember, it is critical for Steve David in lane 2 to make a better start than Dave Villwock in lane 1. If Villwock has the lead and the inside going into first turn, it's race over, even though he does have to run 5 laps, keep it on the water, and go very fast. But the start here is going to be especially critical for the young man from Lighthouse Point, Florida, Steve David.
And most of our boats are bunching up in the west turn. Still about 3 minutes. We'll give you the 2 minutes right there. 2 minutes to go until the start of our championship heat. Everybody is lined up pretty well coming off of the turn, finding their lanes. Again, they have not been fighting for lanes. These lanes were chosen by the drivers based on their total accumulated points.
Dave Villwock was not up in the turn with the rest of the boats. He's coming through the infield. He's going to slide out now into lane 1. That's a maneuver Dave likes to make when he's fighting for lanes, and even when he's not. I guess he's comfortable coming from there and taking his spot. What a beautiful sight now, Mark, as we look down on these 7 unlimited hydroplanes. Arguably the 7 fastest race boats in the world, and they are about to line up. Look at that beautiful overhead shot now as they come down the Kennewick side toward the Blue Bridge, the helicopter right above the bridge. You'll see them all turning left. And as they head up the backstretch, they will get lined up side by side, come down and make a flying start. And as we've repeated a couple of times, that start is going to be critically important in deciding the winner of this heat. Here's the 1 minute mark right now. So they are at the 1 minute mark coming onto the backstretch, which means they can run not at full throttle all the way around, but they can make pretty good headway now. The rooster tails will kick up, and there they go up the backstretch. You're looking at Steve David coming up behind Dave Villwock. Villwock in lane 1, of course, a very good starter, as is Steve David. John Zimmerman's moving way out ahead.
He'll be on the outside, so he's got a longer way to go.
Way on the outside, so he has a long race course, but he is way out ahead, and now Nate Brown puts the hammer down a little bit and scoots up beside him. Watch the boats on the inside now as they come around the turn. How well have they timed this out? It is critical that they start well here in the final. Steve David is back a bit, coming up beside Vilwalk and in between Vilwalk and the boat in lane 3. Now he comes by Vilwalk. They turn toward us. Here comes the start. They come thundering toward us. Nate Brown's way out ahead of everybody. Is he too early? 8, 7,
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I believe 2 boats jumped. The officials will have to tell us. We think that Nate Brown and John Zimmerman were across the line too early. Steve David is ahead of Dave Vilwalk. He has about a half a rooster tail lead on him going into this first turn. Watch from above now. The boat in lane 2 turns it left. Vilwalk, it disappears in his rooster tail. He's okay, though. As they turn up the backstretch, it's Steve David with the lead, but Vilwalk got through there okay, and they are going to come up the backstretch first and second. Look at the Alberto go. It looks faster than it has all weekend. Dave Vilwalk in pursuit in the spirit of Qatar. 1 and 2 as we thought they might be. We didn't expect Steve David to come out of that with the lead, and now Vilwalk is leading him in. He flies the boat, gets it settled back down, and goes by Steve David as they enter the turn.
Apex of the turn, Dave Vilwalk is taking over the lead, and he's on the inside. Steve David about 2 boat lengths behind. You're watching him come off of the exit bin and head down for the end of lap number 1. We go 5 times around. It'll be the Spirit of Qatar, the U-96, across first. Second, Steve David, half a rooster tail behind. J. Michael Kelly is third across, and then Nate Brown. We do believe that Nate has jumped the gun. Your leaders as they head to the Blue Bridge turn. Second lap, Dave Vilwalk, and right behind him, Steve David in lane number 2.
You know, you wonder why Dave Vilwalk is so fast, and sure, he has great equipment, but when he has to, he flies that boat. He takes it up into the air, so it's barely referencing the water every 50 or 60 feet, and he absolutely scorched that backstretch to get ahead of Steve David. Where he is now, he's moved out to a half a rooster tail lead over Steve David in lane 2, continuing to drive hard in pursuit. J. Michael Kelly in the U7, Graham Trucking running a comfortable third, and then it's back to Brian Perkins in the green and white Albert Lee, but he's getting a pretty good race back there from the U5, and Jeff Bernard.
Off the turn, Dave Vilwalk now with a full rooster tail lead, swings it out into about lane number 3. Steve David has to go wider than that. A full rooster tail lead at the end of lap number 2 for the Spirit of Qatar U-96. Dave Vilwalk now just crossing the finish line. End of lap 2 is Steve David. J. Michael Kelly trying to track him down, but he's not having much luck as he's about 2 rooster tails behind. Your leader is Dave Vilwalk. You see him going to the Blue Bridge turn on lap number 3.
Steve David is driving hard. He flew that boat as he came by us here at start finish, doing everything he can to catch Vilwalk. As we said earlier in the lights race, when you're running second, you try to pressure the guy out front, hoping something will go wrong. Vilwalk, obviously, the class of the field here as far as speed is concerned. A good enough start on the inside to take the early advantage. He is not putting any more water, though, between himself and Steve David, who continues to run hard in second place.
Trying to push Dave Vilwalk. He knows if he bobbles just a little bit, Steve David will be right there, even though he's a couple of rooster tails. You can see the spread between them as they go through the west turn.
J. Michael Kelly is reeling in Steve David. He's on the inside of Vilwalk's wake. Steve David is on the outside of it, and Kelly is using that advantage to catch up to Steve David. So we're going to have a race here for second place. It is official, Mark. The U-17 and the U-37 have to run an extra lap. They did indeed jump the gun, and now Steve David realizes J. Michael Kelly is sneaking up on him. He puts the hammer down and pulls away a little bit, putting some room between himself and the third place runner.
And he's moved over just a little bit as well into the lane number 1 position, which he can do. He has a legal overlap. Dave Vilwalk still running out at about lane number 3 right now. Steve David maybe trying to catch him here on lap number 4. You never know.
When Vilwalk gets out ahead, he likes to run out in about lane 2 or 3, and it does leave some room inside of him, and Steve David has moved over there now. He'll be running a slightly smaller race course than Vilwalk. Will that be enough to make a difference? Well, we will see. The white U-96, Spirit of Qatar, extremely fast on the straightaways. It corners very well. One of the best drivers ever to do this at the wheel. Another one of the best chasing him. Great boat racing here on the Columbia River as Vilwalk comes down to complete another lap as the leader. The U-96, Eric Elstrom's Spirit of Qatar.
White flag flies for the U-96 and Dave Vilwalk. Second for Steve David, and the Oboy Oberto means 1 more lap to go. 3 rooster tail lead for Dave Vilwalk as he heads down to the final time around the Blue Bridge turn. got it well in hand. He just needs to keep it on the water and keep the engine running, and he will have his 61st unlimited hydroplane win.
J. Michael Kelly has pretty much given up the chase now. He was challenging for second place a couple of laps ago. He settled back now into a comfortable third. Nate Brown is running fourth on the water, but he's going to have to run an extra lap for starting too soon. So the actual fourth place boat is the U5, which just came by. And now we're getting a pretty good race once again. On the backstretch, the U21 is shut down, by the way, in the west end of the race course. We're coming around the final turn for the final time. Steve David is going to make a move on Dave Villwock. Watch this, folks. Steve David on the inside in the U1. I don't think it'll be enough, but he made a great move to pick up a lot of water. Dave Villwock is going to win it, I believe, but not by much. It is Dave Villwock, the champion of the 2010 Lamb Weston Columbia Cup, and Steve David closed to within a rooster tail on the final turn. Did a great job of flying the U1, oh boy, Alberto, up the backstretch, into the turn, used the advantage to make up a lot of the disadvantage, and now we have a penalty on the U96. Is that correct? All we know so far is a penalty. We don't know why. We have an indication of a one-lap penalty on the U96. We may not have the winner we thought we had, Mark.
Very interesting. Nate Brown.
He moved in on Steve David in the final turn, and Dave Villwock is going to be penalized one lap. He's going to be dropped way back.
He's already headed to the pits, so he's not going to make another lap.
Well, he's going to finish in last place, and Steve David is going to win this event, and he's going to take the national high point lead as a result, with a lot more points scored here in the final than Villwock. We understand the call was in that final turn as they turned toward us, and we talked about Steve David coming around on the inside. The referee has ruled that Dave Villwock did not leave him enough room in there. Squeezed him a little as Steve was trying to pass him on his left. We believe that's the call. All we know so far is the number. We see a number one-lap penalty next to the U96. So we have a big story here in the very last turn. Now Villwock is on the backstretch. They have told him to go around and run another lap, and he's going to do that. We'll have to sort out the order of finish, but we believe it's going to be Steve David moving up into first place. Second place then would go to the U7, Graham Trucking with J. Michael Kelly. Villwock is going to finish behind almost everybody as a result of the one-lap penalty. He will not be happy, so this story is going to go on for some time now. We talked about Steve David winning this heat and the fact that he could retake the national high point lead. It appears that that is exactly what has happened as a result of a penalty on our apparent winner, the U96 Spirit of Qatar. Just when we thought everything was going to go according to the book, no penalties, no problems, we now have a situation, as is often the case, I must admit, in boat racing. So, Mark Allen, what think you of that?
Well, you never know until the last lap has been completed by all the boats exactly who's going to finish where. We would give you a recap at the moment, but things need to be sorted out, and I guess unofficially we'll look at Steve David and his three-peat here at the Columbia River as the winner, and J. Michael Kelly in second. The rest of it needs to be sorted out because we had two gun jumpers. And we had a trailer in Jeff Bernard who came up and moved up ahead because of the gun jumpers. We're going to have to take a break and come back and sort this out for you. So we will be right back. Well, we're still sorting things out here on the banks of the Columbia River. Unlimited hydroplane racing always has a few surprises to throw at you. And in 4 laps, Dave Villwock had the field covered in the championship heat of the 2010 Lamb Weston Columbia Cup. In the last turn at the exit buoy, officials have ruled that he squeezed in. Steve David got a penalty of a lap, which moved him down in the standings, and Steve David to first place.
We heard Mike Noonan on the H1 radio describing the penalty. It's a class 4, which calls for a one-lap penalty, a monetary fine, and the loss of 150 points beyond what he lost by dropping back. So that's going to be a pretty good-sized penalty for Dave Villwock and Team Elstrom, and I'm sure this is going to be discussed for days in the chat rooms and the various places on the internet. shocking ending. Let's go down to Patrick Noland, who has Steve David, the surprise winner. Patrick?
Steve, amazing race. Didn't know what was going to happen right until the end. From what I hear, you couldn't even hear the radio.
No, my radio went out just after the start, and so I was just driving my heart out trying to get him, and I thought coming on that last turn I was maybe going to get him, and then I see him run an extra lap. I'm thinking, well, this could be really wonderful.
So was it beyond your expectations, I'm sure?
Well, we really thought we had a chance to win him, but, you know, give it to those Qatar guys. They were fast all weekend. Dave had a perfect weekend except for this final. We moved back in the national point leads, but it's not over till the final racing Qatar. But thank God for Alberto and this team. Thank you for KNDU for covering the event, and for Kona Radio and everybody else that got all these great fans out here today to see us do something that nobody has done since the Budweiser. That's win 3 times in a row, and our names go on that tree up there for next year.
Yeah, I saw everybody making the 3 with their fingers as you're coming in. How does that feel to do something like that?
Well, I'm used to them using 1 finger, so I'm really excited to see 3.
There you go. And have you ever seen a race turn out like that, where it comes down to that final last corner where you don't know what's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, you never know. You never give up. You just run as hard as you can, and not hearing the radio was maybe even better because they just never back down.
Steve David wins his 3rd straight Columbia Cup title. Amazing, amazing stuff. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Patrick.
Back to you guys.
Promised us a 3-peat, and he delivered, even though it was a little surprising fashion. Steve Montgomery, we talked about him making that charge at the last minute, halfway up the backstretch on lap number 5. If he had not done that, if he'd settled back, Dave Villwock would have had this race. But Steve David pressed him every inch of the way, and that was the difference.
He may very well have caught Villwock by surprise a little bit, because Dave had enough of a lead that he really didn't have to worry about anybody behind him. And now suddenly you have a boat right on your left hip. You have to leave ample room. Dave had chosen to move out into lane 2 or 2.5, which means you do have to allow a boat to come through there in lane 1. And the referee in the helicopter above that turn said there was not enough room there. It's a huge call. It's a spectacular call, and it changes the shape of everything. It changes the champion of the Columbia Cup. It changes the national high point standings. Patrick Noland is going to try to get a word with Dave Villwock, who may very well be unconsolable at this point. I don't know if we'll be able to catch up with him and get his version of what happened there. I believe we will eventually maybe see some pictures. I know we have at least one still photographer in that helicopter, if not video, and we'll be able to see just how much room there was there. But I can promise you the width of that lane that Steve David drove through to get to the finish is going to be discussed, if not for days, perhaps for weeks, at least until we go racing again in Seattle 2 weeks from now.
Well, let's take a look at the official order of finish as confirmed by our officials. And since we put this little screen together, they have become official. Well, Steve David, the Oboy Oberto, first place, 3rd time in a row. And now that gives him 11 unlimited hydroplane victories, and 3 times here on the Columbia River. J. Michael Kelly in the U7 Graham Trucking, a 2nd place. 3rd place went to his teammate, Jeff Bernard in the U5 FormulaBoats.com. Nate Brown jumped the gun, came back around, however, to finish 4th in the U17 Miss Red Dot. 5th place went to Dave Villwock in the U96 Spirit of Qatar. Because of that 1-lap penalty, he dropped all the way from 1st to 5th. I think John Zimmerman proved himself. He did a nice job this weekend. He finished in 6th.
I think Billy and Jane Shoemaker have to be very happy with the job he did. Dave Villwock, by the way, has told people in the pits that they need to look at the KNDU video of that turn. I don't remember seeing anything in our live shots that would have helped him any, but maybe there is something we can come up with later from above, or, as I said, from the still shots. Dave Villwock obviously feels he left enough room. He has been given a severe penalty. He's had the championship here and the season high points lead taken away from him. That's about all we can tell you for now. It's going to take hours, maybe days, to sort this out, but that's going to wind up our live coverage of the 2010 Lamb Weston Columbia Cup. It ended with controversy. It ended up with an incredible boat race. We had thrills and spills, as we usually have here on Columbia Cup weekend. Mark Allen, it was hot and sweaty like it should be. Everything went pretty much according to plan, unless, of course, you're Dave Villwock, and right now you're understandably a little upset.
I guess he would be. You don't want to lose the race and make a mistake. We saw a minute ago Brian Perkins being towed back to the pits. I feel sorry for that young man. He had a great race boat. He's talking, looks like on the cell phone, maybe to his crew to let him know what happened. He went dead in the water up in the west turn and didn't make the finish. But that is a fast race boat. That is a fast young driver. We're going to hear a lot from him in the future. It's been a great weekend. We've had a lot of fun, and we've seen a lot of incredible boat racing. Good to work with you again, Steve, and we'll see you. We'll be back together again for Seattle in 2 weeks. We'll send it back down to Scott and
Before we do that, I want to thank Chad, our brand new director. We broke him in. He is now a hydro geek like everyone else on the crew. Can't wait to get back here next year. Jim Tippett and Matt and everybody from KNDU. Enjoyed working with you as always. And of course, Scott and Christine down there at the cool end of the race course. A pleasure to work with you once again. We'll see you next year.
Here with Dave Villwalk. Dave, obviously a frustrating race. Kind of tell us what you know, what happened about the end.
The throttle stuck partway through the heat, and then at the end there, the sun's getting kind of low. We had a dead boat somewhere up there, which I really don't know where it was. Had another boat that we were lapping, trying to avoid everybody, and then they say I encroached on the one. So I just had all kinds of problems happening at the same time.
Tell me what you think about the call. What's your reaction?
Idea. I don't even know what the call is, so I don't have any idea.
What was your feeling coming in? Did you think you had to win? What was your feeling?
No, I shut it off, and then they told me that I had, because the throttle was screwed up. I shut it off out on the course, and they told me I had to run another lap. So I figured there was some call, so I don't know what it is, but that's what happened.
Have you ever had anything like this happen to you before?
No, this is new.
All right, thank you. Mr. Dave Villwalk, obviously a frustrating race for him today. For now, we toss it back to you guys. Brian, just kind of told me what you saw as the end of this Columbia Cup came to a close. Obviously not what anybody expected.
Yeah, no, I was, after we broke our steering and hooked the boat real hard and messed up the boat a little bit. After that, I couldn't really tell you what was going on. All I know, the Albert Lee team did a great job this weekend. The boat ran really, really well. We made steady improvements. Not quite sure what the damage is on the boat yet. We've got some stuff to fix before Seattle, but I know these guys will get it. We'll get it, and we'll be back in 2 weeks.
I know you probably heard it over the radio, though. You hear that Villwalk's going to win it, and then this strange, crazy thing happens with the penalty. Steve David ends up with his third in a row. Have you ever seen anything like that?
No, that's pretty amazing. I'm happy for Steve and the Alberto team. They've done an awesome job all year long. They definitely deserve it. Dave and the Qatar guys, they'll get one. This is going to be an extremely tough year all year long, all the way till we get to the Middle East, and nothing's over yet.
Have you ever been in a position like Dave where you thought you had a race won and then it's taken away from you?
Yeah, all the time, and it's very frustrating. It's I can't explain in words really what it feels like, but it's very disheartening. It sucks, but at the same time, you have to trust in your officials and the referees, and that's why we have them. So you may not agree with their decisions, but they made them for a reason.
All right, Brian Perkins, driver of the U21, Miss Albert Lee. We thank him for joining us. For now, we send it back to you guys. I'm with Chief Referee Mike Noonan. Explain to us what happened and what was the call at the end of the final.
Well, it's always tough to make a call at the last lap of the last heat. What happened basically was Steve David was catching him, and Steve David established what we call an overlap, which meant that Dave no longer had 7 boat lengths over Steve David. So at that point, when Dave Villwalk entered the turn in the 96, he was forced by rule to maintain that lane where he entered all the way around the turn and come out at the same point. So that meant if he went in 4 or 3, he had to stay at 3 all the way around. He, I guess, realized that he was being caught very fast. They went in at about lane 3, and just closed the door really, really hard and kind of what we call squaring off the corner. Moved over to about lane 2. Really left Steve David very little room. Steve did a magnificent job turning his boat, quickly and sticking it into lane 1 at the apex buoy, which is the middle buoy. And then as he went past the buoy, Dave just drifted back out to the shoreline and then went out to the start-finish line, thinking everything was okay. But it's a very specific rule that says, if you don't have overlap when you enter the turn, maintain that lane all the way around the turn, and he did not. So
it was an easy call for you to make? I guess that's hard to say the last lap.
It was an easy call. I mean, he definitely did it, definitely changed lanes. Even though he did leave Steve David a lane, the rule book doesn't say you can change all the lanes you want and leave as long as you leave one. It says do not change lanes when you enter the turn once somebody's within 7 boat lengths of.
Tough was it for you to make that call right at the end of the race?
Well, you can imagine, last lap, the last turn. I mean, they're coming down, everybody's cheering. Steve David's catching him. And I know Dave was just, he was going to make a good race out of it. He could have stayed in lane 3 all the way around the turn, and it would have been a great race, a good finish, maybe even close, finish. But again, it's those mistakes, and I know Dave didn't mean to do anything, but pinch him down a little bit, and that's what happened.
Thank you very much. A tough call for sure. We also have a comment from the Elstrom team. They say the officials do their best they can, but we needed the points. They say they'll be ready for Seattle. For now, back to you.